Hello out there. Hope you guys are doing well. I'm on a little YouTube hiatus because I'm with family, having fun family time and keeping my focus there. So I don't even have YouTube on my phone anymore and I'm just taking a break. But I wanted to address this Kohberger plea deal. And I've received various emails and messages from people since yesterday requesting me to weigh in or what are my thoughts about it. And so I'm going to do that now and then go back to my break just because it's happening right now. For those who don't know, I've been dealing with the death penalty process for about 35 years, is it now? Over the men who murdered my sister in 1988 and who were both sentenced to death. And so I am intimately familiar with that process and the impact that it has on families of victims. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first, what I want to say is that I completely understand the devastation that the families of these victims, multiple victims in this case, must be feeling. And I watched a video or part of an interview with one of them this morning, and it is utterly heartbreaking. When I try to juxtapose my memory on that kind of a situation, I completely understand the devastation. When something like that happens, and this case is, so it defines the word senseless murder more than most. There are so many emotions that you don't even know where to put them or how to process them. And one of the ways that is helpful in processing that absolute, I don't even have a word for it, injustice is such a small word for it, that has happened, and the hideous indecency, I just don't have the right words for it right now, of what has happened, is that there is a fight ahead of you. There's a lot of phases in the grieving process, anger being one of them, and anger can be a motivator. And anger can motivate you and give you energy to pursue a fight. And in that case, a trial coming up of that magnitude is a big fight. And, he had people fighting for him. And some of the stuff they already had to endure was just heinous already and hadn't even gone to trial yet. So that is a fuel that's keeping you going and knowing that you're going to get there. And I think from what I can tell, I have not followed this case closely. So, but from what I can gather from this bits that I know about it and the interview that I watched today is that it was a very strong case. And obviously by the plea deal, it's a very strong case. And they were assuming that they would win. When we went to our trials, I knew we were going to win. So there wasn't that feeling, but still it's an assault to hear all the things, the absurd things that are said on the behalf of on behalf of a murderer, and that you have to sit there and take it is an assault to what you've already been assaulted with, which is the death itself. So there's just so much to process. And one of the places that you can put those feelings is in preparing for trial and knowing that you're going to get there and that you're going to participate and you're going to, I don't know if any or all of them were going to testify, but you're going to have your say. And, I was sort of gagged through the process. So when I got to court, like I could finally speak and, get all that out and feel like you are actively advocating for the person that you lost and all of those things. And frankly, I found it quite therapeutic, partly because I wasn't afraid that we were going to lose. So it was a champion fighting for justice and for the goodness and for the right side and all that stuff, even though, it's absurd, the things that happen on the other side that we've seen in many cases. So it is therapeutic to go through that. And it gives you a place to put a part of your feelings, part of your grieving process, part of your devastation. It gives a channel to put that into. That plea deal threw them off that cliff. So, like, what now? Where do we deal with that? For me, and I think for a lot of people going through that process, the actual grieving the loss gets on pause. because this is a fight that you're in now. And so for me, in many ways, it was a welcome fight because it kept the deeper pain, not the pain about these people, these men who killed my sister, but the deeper pain of the permanency of that loss at bay for a while. For me, when the trials were over, I got kicked off that cliff. But I got to go through that process and have at least some degree of something being righted in the world. Now, he's going to prison. He's not like he's getting out of prison or anything like that. So, there is that. But these are not rational moments or rational thinking. These are deeply emotional times. So I completely, totally understand how devastating this moment must be for those families to be robbed of that process where they were expecting to be able to go through all the things that you go through, watch that fight bear out in court, feeling confident that there's going to be some justice for your loved one served, and that you're going to see it, you're going to participate in it. You sort of get to sink your teeth into that process as it's happening, gearing themselves up to see him in court. All the things that you have to prepare yourself for, mentally, emotionally, everything, and have that just ripped away. And it sounds like they were not really consulted that much. And frankly, family members aren't really consulted that much. I got to tell you, minimally, really. You think you have some control. You don't have a lot of control over the process. People like to think that we do, but you don't really. Even the most well-meaning prosecutors and attorney generals and all that, they're not really guiding their decisions by family members' wishes. Not that much, in my experience. So I do understand how absolutely devastating this moment must be for those families, and how I know how I felt after the trials, and then magnify that by not being able to go through that process. I will tell you, though, at the end of our trials, even though we got convictions, even though we got the death penalty, which is what the state was seeking, it was a pretty easy process in that regard. Even with that, it was absolutely devastating when it was over, because then all you're left with, the fight is all gone. All you're left with is the gaping hole in your life. And now you got to deal with that. And you've sort of been able to keep that at bay for a while. So now this is just my experience of having dealt with that. So they're getting that right now. And I got that. Even when you get justice, and in their case, they are getting there's some form of justice, not the one they wanted, but they are getting, this man's never going to see daylight again. Even when you're getting that, it doesn't mitigate. It doesn't make everything all right. It doesn't make anything all right. It doesn't touch the wound of the loss at all. It really doesn't. You still have that forever. And so there's that. With all that being said, and I do understand to the best that I can what they're going through. With that being said, the death penalty process is hell on victims' families. I've talked about it a lot. I keep talking about it. I'm dealing with it for 35 years. I'm 65, so more than half my life I've been dealing with navigating the death penalty process. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The worst treatment, it was a high-profile case in Phoenix, my sister's murder, on the front page of the Sunday paper, TV shows, the whole 9 yards. Dealing with reporters, dealing with defense attorneys, everything. The worst treatment that I and my family have ever received through the entire process is with death penalty opponents advocating for the murderers. Without a doubt. Doesn't even compare. The zealousness, the abuse that they put victims' families through, as if we are the ones who are in control of the whole thing, as if we could snap our fingers and make it all go away. They vilify victims' family members, and they sort of lose your humanity. And so they lose the fact that you're completely innocent in this whole thing, completely innocent, and feel like you're their enemy, so they feel justified in coming after you. That's just one part of it. They sent people to my doorstep. Anyway, the amount that they justify fighting for murderers for the cause of eradicating the death penalty, using victims' families as targets, is hideous. And it's something that I've had to deal with. I've had to deal with it up until just a couple months ago. I mean, it has never ended. We have dealt with multiple appeals. At this point, I think in the early 2000s, when we had the most serious appeal, that one of them was released from death row on that appeal, it was estimated that $10 million of taxpayer money had been spent just on the legal process for them, not on housing them, feeding them, medical care, all that, just the legal process for that appeal. $10 million. So now I'm sure that's doubled by now, because it was, 20 years ago or something, that happened. So let's say, just guesstimate $20 million for people that never worked in the United States, the men that killed my sister. So they never paid a dime into American tax coffers, but our tax money, millions and millions of tax money, have gone into legally fighting for them to be released from prison or to get some relief. Really what they're fighting for is to just get them off death row. It was two brothers. One of them was released from death row into life with the possibility of parole. So I went from death penalty appeal process to parole hearings. Thankfully, he died in prison of natural causes shortly thereafter. But what's interesting is that these people who had been fighting for him to get him off death row and so concerned about him and claiming he was intellectually disabled and all this, that went on for years. They did exactly what I said in a victim impact statement, that one blessing was that I knew they would drop him like a hot potato as soon as they got off death row, which is exactly what happened. The death row inmates receive prestige. That's the word I like to use, because it is a prestigious position for them to be on death row. They receive the best of the best legal assistance in the whole system. They receive, and for free, the best of the best legal assistance than anyone that doesn't have millions of dollars to pay for it. But people that don't have money, they receive the best. They have websites. People that are advocating against the death penalty create websites that are like singles ads for them. So they get a lot of attention. They get a lot of people sending them money. Most of them get married on death row because they have, women that fall in love with them and move to be near them and take care of them. And they receive a lot of nurturing support financially and otherwise, being on death row, and protection. They receive a lot more protection in most death row environments than being in a more dangerous general population. I'm sure it could be debated, the quality of conditions of living in more isolation than that, but some people would probably prefer that than being out in a dangerous general population. There are many advantages, but the main advantage for death row inmates is the attention that they get and the free, high quality legal assistance they get. I believe, having navigated this for 35 years, that death row inmates have a greater chance of being released from prison, to get out of prison, and they're the worst of the worst, right, than any of the lifers, or a non-violent offender, because of the quality of legal assistance they get on our dime. They don't pay for any of it. They get it on our dime. The majority of the lawyers that are representing them are not doing it pro bono. It is a cottage industry. They are making a lot of money doing this. And that's a big motivator, because guess what? They have a client for decades, the same client. And they keep billing and keep billing and keep billing and submitting invoices to the government to pay their bills. I mean, how many people are going to have a criminal client that's going to be unending for decades? Those that represent death row inmates do. So, there's a dirty underbelly to all of this. And it's really hard to take sometimes when I sit back and realize how much attention and support these people have gotten who murdered my sister. I'm not getting any free legal services anywhere. So that's, well, I guess I am. I am getting free legal assistance being a victim. I do get that. Um, anyway, thankfully, but with the state of Arizona, but not everybody gets that. I do have that from the state of Arizona, but not to the degree that they are having that kind of support and assistance. So it is a grueling process to be a family member. You can try and divorce yourself from it, but if the process goes on unchecked by people that care about the victim, things happen. I know, I've witnessed it, that if I hadn't got involved, if I hadn't shown up, if I hadn't said my piece, things could have gone way askew to their side. And I'm not going to give that whole example here, but I walked off a victim impact statement one time with a judge who ruled in our favor in a very shocking move, because she had been ruling in their favor for years at that point. And she kind of did what nobody expected her to do, which was rule in our favor after I gave a victim impact statement. And the assistant attorney general pulled me into a back room after that, looked at me, and he said, "That was all you," because of my impact statement. That's what he believed. Who knows? Who knows? I was not going to go give that impact statement because I was just worn out from losing and losing and losing and losing through that appeal process. And I just thought, I can't take it. I can't take one more humiliation and defeat like that. But my attorney said, "I think you need to be there." And so I stayed up till like 2 a.m. writing that impact statement and drove by myself across the desert and went and delivered it. And that miraculously got ruled in our favor, which it's just made his sentencing so that he wasn't serving 2 life sentences together, that he had to serve them back to back, which secured him in prison. Otherwise, he could have gone from death row to being up for parole in less than 5 years. Like really, literally being the possibility of released back into society from, he's never going to see the light of day again, to in 5 years he could get out. It was terrifying. And so he died in prison. The other one, they say the other one has exhausted his appeals. I just looked him up today. There's an article in the Arizona Republic talking about how he's on a short list of death row inmates in Arizona, like 24 of them, I think, who have exhausted their appeals. Don't believe it. He's still appealing. He is still appealing. They are still bothering me with this. He wanted to talk to me. He's concocted a whole new story. And now this new story is where he's admitting that he did it after 35 years of saying he didn't have anything to do with it. Now he's concocting a whole new story and saying that he did do it and he did kill her, but she provoked him. So it was her fault that she was murdered, which of course doesn't line up with any of the evidence. But these high-priced attorneys who we're paying for, have decided to float this new argument where they know they've been arguing for 30 some years on his behalf that he wasn't there, he didn't do it, or if he did it, he was mentally disabled, or how many excuses can we try to fly and see if it's going to land somewhere. Unfortunately, it did land with one judge one time, and it got one of them off death row. It just takes one person with an agenda or whatever skewed perspective to sometimes to say, okay, well, leniency to you. And it just never ends. It never ends. They have, I believe, the last time I looked up the statistics, a 3% chance of being executed. What sentence in our culture do we have that has a 3% chance of ever being carried out? That is their sentence. And it's like they're just on hold until their sentence can be carried out. And they have a 3% chance of it being carried out. So that's what would happen in Kohberger. If he was sentenced to death, and there's no guarantee that the jury would sentence him to death, by the way. So that's a whole other unknown. But if they were to sentence him to death, the odds are ever in his favor that he would never be executed, certainly not in the lifetime of any of these family members. And he would continue to live in basically the similar conditions that he's probably going to be living because they've gotten looser, at least in Arizona, they've gotten a lot looser with the death row inmates and their living conditions that he's going to be living now. So it wouldn't be like he has a harsher lifestyle, but he would have the benefit of people, oh, they'd be lining up to take his appeals and poring over the documents and trying to use absolutely anything and getting paid very well. And those family members would be part of the paycheck, paying them. They'd be dragging those family members back into court. They'd be saying absurd things. They might even be blaming them, the family members. My sister's killer tried to blame me at one point for my sister's death. The things that you just have to gird your loins and find a way to have it bounce off of you and not be a part of your life. And with life without parole is really the only lock them up and throw away the key sentence. They will be forgotten. People, they don't have any money. He doesn't have any money. It doesn't sound like he has a family that has money that's going to be lining up to hire expensive defense attorney or appellate attorneys. He's not going to have attorneys lining up to take his case for decades and decades. He will be forgotten in the system, at least much more swiftly than if he had the death penalty. As devastating as it is in this moment, and it is devastating for them, and it's impossible to think long range. It is. I just want to put this out there that the long range perspective, the long range impact is not what you think it is. It's not satisfying. We did go to the Attorney General at one point when it looked like the other one that's still alive was actually going to get a whole new trial in which he could be deemed not guilty because, like, how many witnesses are even still alive? To come back to court and testify after 20 years, 20 some years, we'd have to go back and go through the whole thing again. And we were just like, can't do it again. Can he get life without parole? Like, practically begging them. And they, there were other considerations that they convinced us that was not possible. So it's another example of how families have limited say and power in what's going to happen. I never thought that I would be like trying to get the death penalty off the table, having nothing to do with like, I don't believe, that the death penalty is wrong. It's nothing about a political statement about the death penalty. It is purely the torture that has put my family through. And crying uncle at a certain point, like, okay, you can win, take it. Just leave us alone and be done with us. So that's the long range situation. I hope this reaches anybody that might need to know what this is really like, and at the same time, I understand being thrown off this cliff and just having to learn how to fly unexpectedly. It's the second time these families have been hit like this in a short amount of time in their life. I get it. There are unseen forces around that will lift you when you least expect it. And there is a life that is waiting for you that is not tainted by this. That I know. That I know for sure because I am living that life now. You find ways to compartmentalize things. You find ways to find joy and beauty in your life that is waiting for you, that there is a life that you can claim that is not ruined, is not destroyed by this or anything else, and that is yours for the taking, and that is possible, and you deserve it, and you can claim it. That's all I want to say. So I hope this is helpful to somebody out there, and there's a lot of beauty in this world and a lot of joy in this world, even with devastating losses and pain. And I'm praying for these families and holding you in light. All right. Have a good one out there. Catch you soon.